Hi, everyone, and welcome to The X, a podcast from inside Silicon Valley about how experience shapes everything from products to businesses to entire industries. I'm Brian McLean, and I'm here with Demetrius Madrigal.
It is a beautiful drone shot, the kind of video that you might see in a travel video, right? Except it's not real. There is no drone, there is no camera, you can't travel because the video was generated by AI. It's from a new tool just announced a few hours ago by OpenAI called Sora. All it takes is typing in a short text, a prompt, and in minutes it spits out a 60-second video clip of pretty much anything you can imagine.
Today, we're going to talk about Sora, as you just heard from that NBC News report. ChatGPT's text-to-video generator that is dominating the AI conversation right now. What is it? How does it work? And what does it mean for many industries moving forward? Good morning, Dee. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I took a deep dive through all of these videos and kind of used my what I've learned from video and photography specialists that I know and formed some opinions.
Yeah, it's an interesting new technology. It's, in my opinion, it was pretty darn transformative. I mean, I saw it and I was really impressed. I mean, there's definitely flaws and problems, but like just to see how far we've come in the last, couple of years since this type of technology has been pushed, in the valley and beyond. I want to talk a little bit about what Sora is before we kind of jump into everything, because OpenAI, the company that produces it, has some good descriptions to kind of talk a little bit about what it is and how it works. So Sora is an AI model that can create realistic and imaginative scenes from text instructions. That's directly from their website. And what they say is that their largest model, Sora, is capable of generating a minute of high fidelity video. Our results suggest that scaling video generation models is a promising path towards building a general purpose simulator of the physical world. When you hear that, Dee, what are you thinking in your mind?
Well, I think there's a lot of companies that are already working on this, and I think that this is OpenAI's approach to it. I think there's a lot of interesting applications that can come out of it, from commercial applications to just scientific applications. If they have accurate representations of real world physics, and there's simulations they can do in space and low orbit and high and potentially deep space in difficult environments. There's a lot of different things that they can mock up and work within this.
Yeah. So I want to tell you an interesting little story that I heard, and it kind of made me think for a minute. So one of the parents at the school that my son goes to, right? We all stand around and we talk every morning, and I'll weave some of this stuff in as we're having this conversation today, because they had some interesting feedback about Sora. Some of them are tech parents, some of them are not. They're in education, other sectors. And one of the parents was telling me that they went up to their daughter, who's older now, she's like preteen, and they said to her, like, hey, that video you're watching, how do you know that's a real video? And actually her response was really, really interesting. She said, oh, I don't know, but why does it matter?
Mhm.
And it started making me think, um, will we get to a point where we don't really care whether or not something was generated by AI versus whether it was generated by a human? Because if this technology gets to the point where it wants to be, which is, you know, seamless integration of scenes into videos, and there would be no physical difference between what we see on there versus something that someone was produced by, a human or something like that, will we get to the point where we don't really care anymore? Like right now, the conversation is AI, is this AI produced or not? Is it AI produced or not? Well, what if the conversation is just, is that cool or amazing or not? That just disappears, that whole part. Do you think we'll get to that point? Is that like something you ever
Uh,
think about?
I, I kind of feel like I'm already there personally.
What do you
Um,
mean by that?
well, when if I see this AI generated stuff that's out there, and I compare that to things I would see in something that was done by a digital artist, right? If I'm watching, you know, uh, a Lord of the Rings movie where a bunch of the orcs are in the background and they're all 3D rendered from a human
Yeah.
who was a digital artist who created that, or if I'm watching like a Marvel movie or something like that, and there's a bunch of 3D rendered backgrounds and characters and things, then I don't really care. If I'm watching The Mandalorian and
Hmm.
there's got Baby Grogu, I don't really care if that was AI generated or if it was done by a human. I mean, it matters as far as um, IP, for example, like something
Uh-huh.
that's AI generated is currently ineligible for IP protections, and
Yeah.
it matters whether or not that person got a job. But as far as just processing the image itself, I don't really care. I don't think it matters. You end up in that kind of Turing test situation where if the AI can do just as good at a job as the human, then I don't know that there's a functional difference.
Yeah, I know. That's how I kind of feel too. I put on these videos on the screen next to me. I have one on right now, but I don't have my video turned on because Dee and I are prepping for season 10 where it's going to be full video. But I have a screen next to me, and on that screen, I usually put something very calming and relaxing, and it's called like flying over. So it'd be like flying over Alaska or flying over, Hawaii or something, right? And I've brought a couple of them up, and I'll turn my head like while we're talking and stuff and just look at it for a second, and then my brain will go, I don't think that's real.
Yeah.
I think that's AI, or I think that's fake, or whatever it is.
Hmm.
But it's happening less and less, to the point where I'm like, well, it's beautiful. Why do I care? So I'll usually leave it up. And I feel like that's what's going to happen, right? Is you blend in AI and stuff that's produced by artists and things like that, and we can't tell the difference. We're going to basically habituate to a point where we're like, oh, okay, I either like it or I don't like it, but I don't really care where it came from. And then the conversation around where it came from is more about intellectual property, like you said, and whether or not the
Yeah.
people who are creating these things are being compensated for them or not, right? And I
Well,
kind of feel that's kind of where it's heading.
well, I think you have to understand that any image that you're seeing commercially, right? Whatever that image came from, whether it's video, whether it's digital, or whether it's video, whether it's a still, even if it's audio, right? It's been manipulated. There,
Yeah.
you're not seeing a real representation of the world. You're even if it's a photograph. I guarantee you they took it into Lightroom and punched up the colors and the light levels and the white balance and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And it's
sure.
same
Yeah.
thing with audio. Like they'll go in. There's a great I think it's on TikTok or something like that where they show somebody playing guitar and it sounds a certain way. It sounds fantastic. It sounds like studio recorded instrument, and then he says, This is what the post production sounds like. Here's what the raw sounds like." And he takes away all of the audio processing that occurs after the recording, and it sounds completely different. It sounds thin. You don't have the subtle reverb that was installed in it. It's transformative. So that's the case with everything that you're seeing that's being presented commercially, whether it's a narrative driven thing or on somebody's website. It's not the real world. And I think once you kind of appreciate that and understand that, then the conversation about what this is and what it's doing is a bit different.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, this podcast is edited,
Yes.
and people might be like, well, wait a minute, it's just a conversation between the two of you. But sometimes D freaks out and starts slamming his microphone against the ground. I have to cut that out. I have no other option. No, I'm just kidding.
It's true.
Um,
And you have to have a very, very durable microphone if you're going to
exactly,
talk about some
exactly.
of
We
these
we have
things.
put plastic covers over the top of it, and he still breaks the plastic covers.
It's
No, I'm,
all
I'm
about the
kidding.
foam. You have to encase the entire room in foam. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. But let's talk a little bit about the details of Sora. So I dug into the technical documents and started kind of getting obsessed and like reading it really deeply because I thought this is really interesting on how it's functioning. Because we both worked in labs at NASA where you know it got real detailed on the type of work that they did, whether it be audio or visual. And it said there, Sora can sample widescreen 1920 by 1080p videos,
Hmm.
vertical 1080 by 1920 videos, and everything in between. This lets Sora create content for different devices directly at their native aspect ratios. It also lets us quickly prototype content at lower sizes before generating a full resolution, all with the same model. It also says it starts with raw files. Sorry, not raw files. Um, raw sizes. So it's not like compressing it first and then doing it. It does some sort of compression afterwards as they add in the different layers in order to fill in the gaps of the video, right? So if you said like, oh, I want a video of someone riding around, New York City. Well, at some point, let's say they get to the end of the circle. If they're doing a circle around New York City, it has to restart again, right? So they have like little fillers that kind of help it feel smooth, the transition of like, instead the video stops and starts over again, it looks like they just started writing again. So the interesting thing about this, though, is the fact that you can use incredibly detailed text in order to produce it. That's what I think is the super cool part of it, right? So, like, if you said, "Oh, I want someone, riding around New York City in a circle on a bicycle and that kind of stuff," imaginatively, like prior to ChatGPT, I would have said like, "Oh, okay, first we have to like select the motorcycle, then we select New York City, and then you know what I mean," and you kind of create the design of what you want to have happen. In this one, you just type it out. And so here's one of their examples that was on there. It had surfers in it. So, of course, I went for it. It said, in an ornate historical hall, a massive tidal wave peaks and begins to crash. Two surfers, seizing the moment, skillfully navigate the face of the wave. So I'm looking at that video right now, D. Do you have it up on your screen as well?
Which one is it? I don't know if I saw
It's
that one.
the surfers inside of the hall. It should be about halfway down the technical documents section. Here, I'll actually just send you a link. Everyone gets to hear me like send links to you and stuff. How fun is that? This podcast is going to zero. Okay. Let's see. All
In a
right.
hallway?
In a hall, like a music hall. So you see where it says they do the cloud Sora, the image of a realistic cloud that spells Sora. Right below it, it takes a still of an ornate historic
Oh, okay.
hall
This is a
and then
different
adds a
website that I'm
tidal
seeing.
wave. Yeah, because that's the one you're on is the actual research section. So I went to the research section to understand how the researchers actually did this.
Okay, yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm
even
looking at it.
though it looks kind of faked in the sense that like you're like, oh, this is weird, like surfers are on this. What I'm looking at is actually the water, and I'm pretty impressed with how good the water looks as it's splashing and crashing, because I've seen a lot of obviously surfing videos and stuff, and it almost looks like they took pipeline from Hawaii and just put people on it or something, right? But it's not. It's generated or inspired by, but it's not the actual wave itself.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
pretty cool though. It's pretty neat. I mean,
it
I
is pretty
look,
cool.
yeah.
I think um I I I feel like our roles here are Brian's the fun one who sees the stuff and he gets very excited about it, and I'm the wet blanket who comes in and says like, well, here's what I think. And what I think is that this is impressive, but put it within the context of other things that I've seen within, content generation, it's less impressive than other stuff I've seen. So do you remember in order to set kind of a basis of comparison, do you remember the um, Unreal Engine 5 demo that we saw?
Oh my God, yeah. Because we did a whole podcast on it. It was
Yes.
phenomenal.
So here's the thing. I think Unreal Engine, which is their generative tools are partially AI driven in collaboration with the digital artist who's working within it, is far more impressive than this. As far as the quality of the images that are
Is it
coming out.
far more impressive though if one of them was generated over the course of 3 months of hard work and the other one was 30 seconds?
Well, I don't know if it was generated over 3 months. I remember
No, the point
seeing
I'm
them
trying to make is
generating.
that
I do remember them generating. So they had the demo. They had the Rivian vehicle driving through,
yep.
and that looked really, really good. So that I think was a much more impressive video. I don't know how long it took them to create that, but they also had within the demo them generating new environments on the fly, and those looked incredible. And I feel like the backgrounds on a lot of these are really good. Um,
Yeah.
Looking at all the videos, I think where they run into problems, I have like an itemized list, right?
Oh,
Uh,
lovely.
so I think they're very good at backgrounds, reflections, shadows, but they're bad at humans and they struggle with animation. So there's some stutter sometimes with animation, non-human animation. and there's a lot of stutter and animation issues. Seems like dropping frames when it comes to humans, even within reflection. Sometimes it seemed like
Yeah.
the motion within reflection was not quite synced up with the motion of the human animation.
Okay.
Uh,
Uh-huh.
I noticed that when they're walking, it seems like there's a stutter. They have like an uneven gait. Sometimes legs appear out of nowhere. They struggle with hands, especially both
Hands are
by
hard. Hands are
hands are
very
really
hard.
hard. You ask anybody who does any kind of animation or illustration, hands are really hard.
Yeah.
But they don't. The AI doesn't seem to know what to do with hands. Hands are just doing strange things that people wouldn't do. So that's something that I think is going to be really hard to catch on.
Well, I mean,
Um,
let's pause there for a second. How many times have we done a video and either one of us has says to the other person, "Hey, what are you doing with your hands right there? Let's do a retake." That
yeah,
happens all the time because you're
it
just like
does.
sitting there thinking and suddenly you're like moving your thumbs because you're nervous or something and you're like, "Dude, that looks so weird." Right?
Yes.
Don't
So
do that.
humans are bad at hands, but they're actually good at evaluating their own work to be like, all right, that wasn't good. Like I need to
Yeah.
figure things out. And what they will do is they will do performance capture. Like professional digital artists will do performance capture in order to capture what a human was doing naturally without thinking about it. Because when we use our hands gesturally, like in a conversation or something, it's unconscious. It's just happening. It's not something. If you start thinking about it, it starts to become unnatural.
Yeah.
So for an animator, they can't really. It becomes very difficult to think about what a character is going to do with their hands, and then have that become feel spontaneous. So that's where sometimes the performance capture comes into play. I think that's going to be a real challenge for the AI going forward. Without, even if they're doing performance capture, if they're not basically cutting and pasting or modeling it directly on that performance capture, like the way the digital artists do,
Uh-huh.
if they're trying to extemporaneous or come up with new movements and stuff, I think it's going to feel unnatural and awkward.
But what if it trained off of like, let's say OpenAI said, okay, we made a partnership with YouTube, and YouTube said you can pipe as much video as you want for people who are sitting at desks with their hands, for example, right? And then they just
Yeah,
and the system just studied and studied hand movements. Don't you think that would kind of like tailor up the quality of the hand movements because it would have such massive data that it can pull from?
I think it'll get better, but the right way to do this, if I was designing the AI system, is you have to build a computer model of the subconscious processes that are going on into the hand movements.
Yeah.
It's like when you're developing like an animatic of a human being, you have to give it a skeleton in order for it to move convincingly. That
Mhm.
is the equivalent of that.
I kind of wonder too, like how this technology can enhance an animator's like ability to kind of like visually rethink their ideas. Like, for example, you're talking about hand movements, and let's say it's somebody like you say, oh, someone at a birthday party jumping up and down, clapping for a friend or something like that, and an animator is thinking to themselves like, oh, I need to do this because I'm building this out for a movie or a script or something I'm doing, and then you just ask it to do it, and then it kind of shows you what you're thinking, and then from there it actually creates inspiration for you to actually do what you want to do. Like if the tool is going to become this like really good inspirational tool, even though it's not perfect, because it doesn't need to be perfect to inspire you, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that it can absolutely be used as kind of a working tool in the background that somebody can use either for testing ideas or so on and so forth. There's a couple other things that I noticed, like with animals,
Uh-huh.
it had a hard time with the physics of things. So the limbs
Yes.
on animals seem to like have the wrong number of limbs, or they generate a new limb out of nowhere. Object permanence seems to be an issue. So I don't know if it is understanding the physical world just
Can you
yet.
explain what that means for anyone who doesn't understand objects permanence?
So
Object
object
permanence?
permanence is the idea that when something is out of view, it still exists. And within these videos, sometimes it seems like when something passes out of view of the video, the AI seems to forget that it's there and it's generating a new one out of like if a limb moves behind somebody's arm or behind out of view, it becomes obscured for some reason. Sometimes a new limb will just kind of like generate out of their lap, and
Mhm.
it's really, really off-putting. And part of that is, how do you teach a non-physical entity like this AI what the
Uh-huh.
physical world feels like in order to
Mm.
communicate that through a video? I think that's going to be a huge challenge going forward. And I think you can kind of simulate it, but and give it some rules. But there are, when you look back at what the Disney animators did in order to kind of create the fields of motion and things, they invented a lot of the animation rules that were going on. Not Walt Disney himself, but a lot of his employees.
Yeah.
Uh, they had to kind of break the physical rules in order to create the sense of it, and that takes kind of an intuitive knowledge of how physics work, and I don't know, and how physics feel, more importantly, that I think it's going to be challenging to get into an AI model.
Yeah, it will be. I do think though about like how we're trying to apply AI into robotics and things like that. I wonder
Mm-hmm.
if the data can be reversed, meaning like you put it into robotics. Robotics has a sense of the physical world on how it should walk, jump, run,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is, right? And then that data gets piped back into the system for the simulator. So the simulator goes, now I kind of have some experience because I
Yeah.
just played in the real world where I touched the ground, the sensor told me how hard it was, or those types of things, and then it sucks that data back into the system. So partnerships between robotics companies and like open AI in order to like perfect the model. Because you said something, right? So you and I have this little kind of discussion, call it a discussion, it was more of like a dispute, about like I look at this and I go, oh God, this is good. Like meaning this is so much better than what we saw 5 years ago that it's scary, right? So my
Yeah.
brain immediately goes to, as a future thinker, right? I always go to like 2 years, 3 years out, and I go, damn, this model is going to be so much better. We really are going to be in a position where we're using AI most of the time for things because the quality is good enough that humans are like, okay, that's good enough, or that works, right? And you made a really interesting point about like, well, now they're working on the hard stuff.
Yes.
And so I think what you're talking about right now is like they were able to get to this point, let's call it 80%, to a point where people are like, damn, that's hella good. And then now they got this last 20%. And then the last 2% is probably like tremendously challenging, right? And this is a steeper hill to climb now. And
Mm-hmm.
that steep hill is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to humans' ability to discern the difference between something that's real and not real, because we have
Yeah.
much more processing time and power in our brains over the growth of our life than this system just simply looking at something and saying that's what a dog does. But then if you take a greyhound and you replicate that onto a Shiba Inu, you're going to go, something's wrong with that Shiba Inu, right?
Yeah. So I ran an experiment the other day, right? I took some of these videos. I made sure that you couldn't see kind of what they were, or that they were. I made sure they didn't have any titles saying like, "Oh yeah, I generated" or anything on them.
Uh
And I
huh.
showed them to Christine, my significant other, right? And she's a photographer. She's very and a visual artist, as well as a chef that she does professionally. And I had her react to them, and I'm like, "What do you think about this?" And she saw some of these videos, and she hated them, especially the ones with humans in them. She was like, "That
Yeah.
is unbelievably creepy. Why are you showing me this?" She was like almost mad at me. And it's because I think a lot of these videos are in a stage of uncanny valley that I don't think that having humans in them is going to be usable at this point in time,
Yeah.
unless those humans are static and not moving. I think that is probably your best bet as far as where they are right now.
Well, I mean, what is your thoughts then on some of these images that they created of just a random human? It's not a real person. It is not a photograph. It's just like, hey, see that person standing in the background over there?
Hmm.
That person with a black coat and boots on or whatever it is. Whether she's walking down the street or not, you look at the video and you go, that's a real, your brain goes, oh, that's a person. But it's not a person. It's
Mine
made up.
doesn't. Mine doesn't actually. That is mine has for some, not a lot, but some AI generated static images has
Uh-huh.
been really well. But I look at some of these, I'm like, okay, yeah, the textures on their face are weird. The movement's wrong. They're kind of jerky. Like that's not how a human would move. That's not how a human would act. Like the choices they're making as far as like how they're moving their hands or how they're moving their feet.
Hmm.
Um, the textures on the skin a lot of times is just a little bit off. and it's close enough that if if you look at it for a split second and then they take it away, you probably okay, that was a human. But if you look at it for like if you get to the second two or three, you're like, okay, that's something's off.
Uh-huh.
And I think one of the difference is for me is that I've played a lot of the recent AAA video game titles. You know, I've played like Metal Gear Solid 5 and Horizon the Forbidden West and some of these games where it's just like the animation within that and the background rendering and everything are so incredibly impressive. They're beautiful. You can take photographs of them. The humans are rendered really well. The movement of them is done really well. And a lot of times they're maybe not as just from a pure, if you took a static image of them, they probably wouldn't be quite as close to real life as you would see in some of these AI generated ones. But because the motion is much more intuitive and natural, then they're
Yeah.
much more convincing characters. So I think that there's application here, and I think some of it could be finished application that can go out to the public. But right now, my guidance would be keep humans out of it. Like, don't have any humans in any video that you're going to make that's going to go out to the public, unless you're specifically talking about the capabilities of AI.
Well, let's talk about something else for a second, though. You made a really interesting point. You're like, oh, I play these games, I do this stuff. But your framework in your mind, D, is already framed up that you're playing a video game. Your
Well, I look at these
framework in your
videos and I think
mind,
this feels very video gamey.
yes, but I let me reframe this. So hold on a second, pull my chair back. So I look at it and I go, you know that I told you that this is OpenAI generating these simulated people. I didn't just shoot your picture of me and my wife hanging out at the beach and then have an AI generate person in the background and say, like, can you tell something's fake here? So my question is just from a pure psychology standpoint, like if I would have showed you some of these pictures and been like, hey, I just went to the beach and met this new friend or something like that, would you
Mm-hmm.
know the difference? I mean, you might say, yeah, sure, but it's because you're looking for those differences right now. My concern is that people won't be looking for those differences, and because they're not looking for them, it just slips right by their brain. They don't look for the
Yeah.
texture. They just go
Well,
like, oh, that's just their friend.
this is why I did the blind test with Christine
Yeah.
because I had the thought, okay, this feels very video gamey to me.
Uh-huh.
These aren't convincing. Like I'm not convinced that these are that these are real humans, and I don't know if that was necessarily the objective, but they don't look photoreal to me. So I showed it to her, and she reacted more negatively than I did.
Yeah, but did you
Um,
show them to her saying like, "Hey, I want you to react to something or see something," or did you say
I
like,
literally,
"Hey"?
I literally said, I want to show you something and see what you think, and that's it.
But normally when you say that to her, it's because you're about to show her something shocking or crazy.
No, usually when I say that to her, it's because I've got a cat video I want to show her.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's like a real cat video, and the cat's doing something cute. So I don't think that she expected at all for it to be like an AI kind of evaluation thing. If anything, she saw it. I think her first thought was like somebody animated this, like a human did it, and
Yeah,
they didn't do
yeah,
the best job at it.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is like her discerning eye, because she does this type of work, might be really, really good. But I'm wondering, like someone who doesn't really think about it that often, like my parents, if I just
Mm-hmm.
said like, "Hey, look at this cool video of this guy, riding his mountain bike, like the one they have on that research page that I sent there," and be like, "Hey, look at this cool picture of Brendan riding, my friend Brendan riding this mountain bike down a hill," they might go. They might. I mean, it does look like it's floating a little bit, but like they might say like, "Oh my gosh, he's moving so fast. That's interesting." Like I don't know if they would say like, "Is that
Well,
fake?"
well, this is a challenge for you, right? This is something that we don't have to. We can go right to the horse's mouth, as the saying
Sure.
says, right? We don't have to speculate about this stuff. You can take that as a challenge. I'm going to give you two challenges, right? Number one, uh, take some of these videos, the most convincing ones that you can find,
Yeah.
show them to your parents. Don't tell them anything about it. Just be like, hey, I want to get your reaction to this,
Mhm.
and see what their thought is, how they're reacting, and see if they can identify that that they are an actual person or not, and if they're animated, whether or not they were generated by AI or not, without telling them. Just
No,
tell
just
them,
let them
just ask
react.
them
Yeah.
like, oh, what do you think this is? The other is your second one is find a video, an animation for me that includes a human that you can send to me and ask, is it real or is it not? And I struggle with it and I can't get it right.
Okay. No, that's a good challenge. because I went down the rabbit hole with this because because the reason why I went down the rabbit hole was because I think that OpenAI did a pretty good job of explaining how they don't give you like the details of how their technology works, but they're explaining what's actually happening. And it's a really everyone should look at it. It's the research section of their website on Sora. And it kind of explains how the technology is creating these layers and all this kind of stuff. And I just look at it and I go, well, if you just give this a little bit of time, like 365 days. The next version of this, which I'm sure they're already working on and probably have already surpassed, um, it's going to get so good that we're not going to know the difference. The average person will not know the difference unless you tell them you need to know that there are differences. The fact that they're very good though. One thing that they did say was that they were going to label every one of them as AI. So if they start releasing this stuff or you start using the tool to produce stuff, you can't do it right now. It's only closed beta to like researchers and stuff. But like once they open it up, that it's gonna be labeled as AI in the bottom right hand corner, so that as videos go out into the world, because people will type up really cool, interesting stuff, and I can tell you what the next wave is. I just thought of something right now, D. The next wave of interest is people are going to start putting tons and tons and tons and tons of these videos on Instagram and all these places. And then friends will start sending them to each other and be like, oh my God, look at this super creepy thing that, D created or whatever it is. And it's all going to be these AI generated videos and stuff for fun. Like people are just going to goof around. It's
Yeah,
like the new memes.
I already see this on Reddit. Um,
Yeah.
if you follow like Midjourney and stuff like that, there's some image
Yeah.
generating guys, and some of them are definitely better than others. And that's one of the reasons I think like I know sometimes it can be full on fully real, like photorealistic. And for me, like I'm looking further down on the research slide, and there's one image of a woman that is a still that I'm like, okay, that's basically photorealistic. It looks like a manipulated image
Are you
because
talking about the close up of the woman's face?
yes,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I can tell if it was a photograph of say, okay, this has spent some time in Lightroom and
Yep.
Photoshop in order to kind of clean up the image because the colors don't always pop like this, and the bokeh is a little odd. That's another thing I noticed from the video. The camera behavior, as far as focus, wasn't always the way that a camera would actually work, and that stood out to me. But I think they're much better at stills right now, which is normal. Animation is hard; it's very hard. Uh, but I think that using stills right now is going to be further along than animation. But I think that we're already seeing some kind of animation stuff. You can find some of these subreddits out there where people are sharing stuff that looks cool, some of the stuff that looks bad,
But
and
this begs the
sometimes the
this
things
begs the
that are
question though,
creepy and
D.
weird are the ones that really get the most attention on there.
Oh, of course, yeah. Because I mean, like that the older woman blowing out the candles, remember?
Oh, that
And then
was nightmare
suddenly,
fuel.
and
That was
yeah,
just night. I literally, I think I had a nightmare about that for a little bit.
and the extra finger shows up on that person's hand or whatever. It was so creepy.
And the candles have too many flames on them.
Yeah. So there's something going on, and then the way her lips move when she blows it, I was like, "Oh my God, this is creepy." But in like a good way. Like I was like, "Oh, you can make like a creepy video about this or something, like a music video."
Yeah,
But this begs the question, though. So you said something that really kind of brought up an interesting thought. If you were asking to have a picture of a woman, so if you said to ChatGPT, "Please create a picture of a woman close up in Australia." At the beach, whatever it is, right? But then you added in, do not touch up this photo. That might be more realistic, and people might be like, oh, wow, you met a new friend at the beach or whatever it is, than the ones that they're producing because the system automatically touches it up to be perfect, like
yeah.
perfect lighting or perfect whatever. And that's where it falls apart because doing that Lightroom stuff like you're talking about, you could tell when something's been retouched.
Yeah, well, here's the thing: is that it hasn't been retouched. Just got generated that way. You'd have to. The prompt would be make it look like a raw video from my phone or something.
Yes. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, it's because the way that these are generated, it's not as though they generated a raw photo and then touched it up like we would. It's just using the visual style of a processed image.
Yeah. Well, this begs the question though of like, if this is the case, right? Then
Hmm.
I want to talk a little bit about some of the questions that came about at the school because I told everyone I would weave this back in. So you always joke and say like parents are always more nervous, obviously, than the average parent, like, which is totally true, like regarding
Yes.
their kids and stuff. But some of the questions that came up was like, so does this mean that at some point someone could take a picture of my face and then go create a porn? And it would look
I
maybe not exactly like me, but
yeah.
somewhat like me. People think that that's me in a porn. And I said, yeah, probably. I mean,
Well,
being realistic, probably, yeah.
here's the thing. I have bad news for them.
It's already happening.
You can already do that. You can already do that. You don't. You just. You might. The AI tools aren't there for it, but
Yeah.
people are actually, you just bring it into Premiere or After Effects or something like that, and you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, but D, you're
Is
talking
there a
about
difference?
there is the difference. And the difference is that when an AI tool can do it, that means that the average person can goof around and do it.
The average person can goof around and do it now.
No
The
way. It would look horrible, dude. It's so hard to use those tools. We've talked about this. We're gonna do a whole podcast on Canva
I
versus like that.
guarantee you can take the average teenager or 20-year-old,
Okay.
a Zoomer who's already has a lot of technical proficiency just from growing up and living their life,
Yeah.
can get a hold of a either a free or pirated version of some of the software, watch a couple of YouTube videos, and make something that's reasonably convincing.
Maybe. It's pretty hard, man. Like meaning like to put a face on somebody. I think they could do it without like say trying to
I think
replicate
they
like
can
a.
make it and make it more convincing than what an AI can do right now.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, if there's any listeners that think that they can produce something better than what the AI produces, email it to us. I want to see it.
Well, let's make it not a porn though.
Yeah, yeah, not a porn. Don't send me porn. I don't want. I don't want
Yeah,
anyone sending me porn.
put
But
Brian's face on like a world class athlete who's in the middle of doing something.
yeah, how about a big wave surfer? Make it look like I'm actually that awesome, which I'm not.
Something more believable, maybe like curling.
Oh, thanks. I do have a broom in the garage I can practice.
There you go.
But the question was that okay, and then another question was is that when you think about the ability of these tools, whether it be ChatGPT or Sora or the combination of them both, how do you weave these into education so that it's not this like forbidden tool that every kid tries to go after and use and wants to be a rebel and use, but it's more like you can use it, but we have to figure out a way to make it worth it. Like whether it be you're learning something or you're learning how to be effective at the tool use or whatever it is, so that it doesn't become that. Because most of the parents are just kind of like, oh, I wouldn't let my kid use that. And I'm like, well, they said the same thing when the internet came out. They said the same thing when mobile apps came out. They said the same thing when they started allowing kids to take phones to school. Uh, it's probably more of like, how do I teach them about it, how to use it, when it's appropriate to use it, when you want to push your brain and not let some other brain do something for you. That's kind of my thinking around it. But there's definitely a feeling of like, this is awful because then creativity gets squashed, right? You're no longer trying to be creative yourself, trying to build something yourself, trying to think through something. You're letting it do it and then you're just modifying it. And that's a different brain function.
I mean, I would treat it as the same as having a human animator who can do things for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which isn't to say that you can't still do it yourself. You can tell, like, if you had an animator who was sitting there in the classroom, and you tell them, like, oh, create an animation of this, then they could do that for you. It's not any different, honestly. I don't. Well, there are differences, but as far as the functional difference to the person who's having it created, there's not that much, other than being able to ask questions of the artist of why they did this. So if they can dial in the physics realistically, then you can do things like the egg drop test
Mm-hmm.
or chemical experiments or physical experiments that are mocked up within a safe environment. Right? You can show somebody what happens if you drop sodium metal into water, for example. Right? Which I've always heard, but I've never seen it, and it would be generous. It would be dangerous to demonstrate it.
Sure.
So you can mock that up within an AI generated video who understands the physics and have that put out. You can mock up what a nuclear reaction looks like without actually generating a nuclear reaction. So there's a lot of things that you can do within that in order to provide demonstrations. A lot of the stuff you can go out and probably find it on YouTube because somebody's done it before. But you can also do it in the moment, and you can have the students ask questions of, how does this behavior look like of this animal in the natural world or something like that.
Yeah.
Like
Assuming
how did a
assuming that what it's
T-Rex hunt?
producing assuming that what it's producing though is actually what it really looks like.
That's, I think, the challenge right now, because I don't think it understands physics properly. I watched that the mountain biking video you just mentioned. I was like, oh yeah, the
Yeah.
physics are all off on this.
Yeah, because when he turns the corner, it looks like he's actually floating.
Yes, I mean it looks like he's floating all the time. That, and there's no movement or bounce to the camera itself, and then it appears like it's supposed to be helmet mounted. Like, okay, that's not how that would work at all.
Well, to be fair, if you look at a lot of the GoPro stuff that has that AI stability built into it and like all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff, it actually does look like they're kind of floating now because
If you,
because it
I mean,
works so well.
if you do take a couple seconds of it, but like
Yeah,
you can still see when they're moving their head left and right, and this person's head never moves.
yeah. Maybe they're just
So,
incredibly good, D. Who are you to judge?
I mean, I think if you're good, you're actually checking your environment around you, make sure there's not like a tree branch in your way or something. So I think, let's talk a little bit about like where this can be applied now,
Yeah, yeah,
right? So I think, and I've said before, I think the backgrounds are fantastic. I think if you're using this in an animations perspective, if you want to use a produced video that's going to be on your website or something, there's one good example of waves crashing around like a lighthouse or something.
yeah. That was pretty good.
That one I was like, all right, I can't really see anything that I would improve on this. This looks like it's photorealistic. I would put it up there and it would be just fine. So things like that, where you have environmental movement, maybe you have some clouds moving or something like that, something that doesn't have a human or animal figure in it. I think that's ready to go right now. I also think if you're an animator, if you're somebody who's doing a key animation of characters or is good at character animation, it's really good at generating those backgrounds that you can use. Just create the backgrounds, output it as a file, and then you can use it as a background for your character animation. I think that's
Yeah.
something within that environment work really well.
I mean, I think some of this stuff, not in this form or whatever, I haven't talked to anyone at Pixar in a really long time. I did early on, but it's been a long
Hmm.
time. It probably is tools that we're not aware of that Pixar uses in order to generate backgrounds and stuff like that, just kind of automatically,
Yeah.
just to get them inspired or help move things quickly. I always think back of that example I've given before, which is that we had met someone who came from Disney and to a client of ours. And when they came in to work in the UX department, we were in the UX department for an extended period of time. They had taken this physical product that we were working on and they started making like 3D renders of like how all the buttons worked and stuff like that.
Hmm.
Sorry, not 3D renders, 3D models of how the buttons would work and everything. Very quickly, they coded it up, and it really helped everyone really think through like what was happening with this physical product. And I was
Hmm.
like, that's awesome. And so he started teaching other people how to do it and stuff. And I feel like that's where we're at now. Like, I love the idea of taking something creative, excuse me, out of my brain and being able to see it kind of come to life to some extent, because I think it'll take us to the next generation of building something a lot faster.
Hmm. Yeah, I think this would be really helpful for internal use within a tech company, for example, or even like not a tech company, somebody who's like John Deere, for example, who's developing a new tractor.
Yep.
Uh, I would love to be able to feed it a storyboard and for it to spit out an animatic of like a use case or something. I think that would be incredibly useful.
Yeah, I was also thinking about how this could be used in order to help with the development of live plays. So like
Yeah.
if like you always say that you're going to run across here and then the tree's going to do this or do that, but it's like imagine being able to like creatively build that, right? And then
Hmm.
show it to everyone because some people learn through visual rather than just
Yeah.
listening or right? And then say that's what we're going to do. And then they
Yeah.
go, "Oh, got it. Okay, got it." Right? It's like there's a lot of use cases that I feel are incredibly powerful in something like this. And also at the same time, if you just quickly need like, hey, I need drone footage of the San Francisco Bay, and it's able to produce a really, really, really good one, and it's only a couple seconds for like a video you're doing.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. I mean, it sucks for the person who actually goes out and makes money by like really working hard to like create the videos with drones, but it's like I don't think you're going to be able to stop this technology.
Well, I think if you're making an independent film and
Yeah.
you want some of that B-roll of
Ooh,
environments, I
yeah.
think that's very useful, especially if you can feed it a photograph of like here's like the external of the house that I want. Give me some tracking shots of it.
Yeah.
I think they're not going to have the money for these drone operators anyway. So I think that is very useful within that space, even within like the Hollywood system and things, for creating animatics, for creating early kind of like visualizations of what a scene might look like. You can test out your color theory, you can test out your camera movements, those kinds of things. I think you can test out your lighting.
Yep.
I think that would be very useful, and I think it's kind of ready to go now.
Yeah. It's interesting. I heard someone say they were talking about how we used to use helicopters to do all of our footage for movies and stuff. Right? It's
Yeah.
an incredibly dangerous thing to do because
Yes.
helicopters crash all the time and they're expensive and all that. Right?
Yeah.
And they said when drones came, it just fundamentally changed the whole business because then it's just this little thing flying above the sky and it could take the videos and all stuff like that. This is like the next level of that. Now you don't even need to
Mhm.
take your drone out. Now you just say, imagine this, please, and then let's just weave that in or
Yeah.
use that as our inspiration. It's just like it keeps getting easier and easier and easier and easier.
Yeah. Or you could test out, the design of an environmental build, right? If you're like, oh, give me, you can get footage of like an airport or something like that that is controlled airspace, so you can't fly a drone in there, or a stadium, for
Yeah.
example, right? You can test out your design of a house, of a building, of like, okay, well, no, make it 3 feet taller, or three stories taller, or add some bushes in front. You can do that kind of thing in order to kind of work out what the design of your sets might look like, or your environments, before
Uh-huh.
you build them physically.
Yeah, but there's also some downsides too. I just want to point this out. It's like during an election time like this, like if this was available, you'd be able to say, "Hey, generate a video of, Donald Trump, on the ground or something like that, like, with a broken leg or Biden tripping off the Air Force One, like, and then suddenly you can spread a tiny little blurred clip of this everywhere and suddenly start changing the way people
Well,
see."
again, we've already kind of talked about this. People are already doing this, and they're just using the tools that are existing now, and you have to have a human do it instead of the AI.
This is just
And
easier. When everything's
and
get easy,
actually,
it gets messy.
you might have less control over the metadata in that case if it's a human doing it with tools that they have.
Yeah, I just feel like when things get really easy though, D, it gets really messy. That's the way I see it. Is because anyone, your next door neighbor could be like,
Uh,
"Oh, look what I made," and put it up on YouTube, right? It's like
so should
rather
we
than
limit
spending
the
hours.
usability on these video editing applications?
No, I just want to find a more permanent way of labeling the videos.
Yeah, I think that's something you can embed in the metadata in order for people to know. I think part of it is just like people need to understand, like in that old movie Rising Sun with Wesley
Oh
Snipes and
yeah. Oh yeah.
right.
Great example.
I remember Tia Carrere talking to Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery and saying like, you don't think video can be manipulated, and just understanding that that is a possibility, and that the things that you're seeing are not necessarily true, and you're going to have to look at a lot of the reporting around that in order to determine and exercise your own judgment. I know this is like a buzzword that people abuse these days in order to determine whether something is true or not.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'd agree. Well, hey, let's wrap up with our predictions. So I'll go first because I don't know. You went first last time, I think. Is uh, my big prediction for this is not the common ones that we talked about a little bit throughout this, but like I really do think that the next phase of social media is going to be driven by all these. I think there's going to be a huge like check out this goofy AI video, this scary AI video. It's going to be less about people running around with their cameras trying to do things and more about what people are creating with these tools and then sharing them online. I think we're going to see a huge wave of this, like years and years of, you know, me getting videos from all my friends saying like, haha, this is so funny. And it's going to be fewer and fewer actual humans doing it. That's just kind of what I see as a big shift. That's it.
What
That's all I'm predicting because I feel like
what's
we talked
your
about everything else.
what's your predictions for how the technology will develop?
Okay, so because we had this conversation earlier and we talked about how like uh, self-driving cars have really struggled. Everyone thought that they were just going to get to this completion point of like they function, but the last 2% has been incredibly difficult. And even Elon Musk had said like that last 2% is like really hard. Um, I think it's going to get incredibly good in the next 24 months. And then to your point, perfection might take 10 years. But I think it's going to be so good in the next 24 months that we're going to forget all about perfection. And all we're going to do is be sharing and using videos that are just not 100%, but good enough. Because what we've learned in Silicon Valley, sometimes good enough is better than perfection because perfection takes forever and good enough gets things moving.
Interesting. Okay.
And that's
Well,
my prediction.
my predictions are one of the things I think we're going to see in the next couple of years is kind of this being used heavily for independent film and
Mm-hmm.
and kind of you're going to see a lot of like small filmmakers using the auteur style, which is they're the writer, director, actor within this film in order to generate things that was difficult to do. You would need a studio to do it before. So I think you're going to see more
Yeah.
of those kind of films being produced. You're going to see more of the Robert Rodriguez style of approach where somebody's doing all of these things using AI tools to supplement what they're doing in order to put this out. I think you're going to see them kind of providing a bit of a back and forth with the AI tool makers. I think OpenAI eventually will not be the leader in this space. I think it's going to be Unreal Engine 5, which means Valve, which means Disney, right? At this point.
Ooh.
Or not Valve,
Ooh.
Epic.
Okay. Epic.
So
Yeah.
that I think is going to be a big element. I think you're going to see an explosion within the artistic space of artists using these as tools, and it's going to allow them to produce new and different material, and it's going to allow them to do it cheaper and easier and faster.
How long until we see the first feature film completely done by AI with absolutely no actors in it? No human actors in it.
So a Pixar movie?
No, not animated. Like meaning like it looks like real people. We look at it and we go like, oh, it's just like John Wick or something, right? But
Yeah,
Keanu Reeves is not acting.
I think about 10 years ago.
Like oh, those were terrible, dude. like I'm talking about like one where everyone it's like well
If it's
actually so much of these movies are AI now, not AI but CGI. But
I mean, the second Matrix movie had tons of that.
yeah. But I mean, like one where we kind of go
It was
like,
like 20 years ago.
wow, what an amazing actor, but it's not a real person.
Um, I think maybe Peter Jackson is going to make a Lord of the Rings movie
Mm.
with a CGI version of Gollum, and everybody will be like, "Wow, that looks so real." Or John Favreau is going to make a movie with like a baby version of a character that was beloved in the original trilogy.
No, you're
Now,
talking about pieces, though. See, you're always getting to details. Look, you're going to pieces. I'm talking
it's already
about
there. That's my point. It's already
okay,
there.
the
It's just not.
Notebook.
It's just
Okay,
not a human thing.
when are we going to get the movie The Notebook in AI version that everyone falls in love with? They're crying at the movie theater. They think it's amazing, and you can't tell the difference between a
It's
real person and
100% produced by AI.
100%.
Uh 80 years.
Seriously, you really think it's going to take that long for it to get to that point? You just
Well,
challenged OpenAI right now.
I don't think it's going to be OpenAI. I think it's going to be Unreal or somebody like that. Uh, Now, if you mean that all of the visuals and is the audio being produced by AI also?
All of it, D. Meaning we did not use any physical actors, but we have real physical looking humans
So
in
if I'm
there.
so I'm just going to OpenAI. I'm going to ChatGPT and says, produce a movie for me about Nobunaga's attempted takeover of Japan, and it just produces like a 2.5 hour movie for me based on that
No,
prompt.
I'm gonna make it a little more detailed. I'm gonna say that you probably do have to say like this is the first scene, the second scene, or whatever. Like there's some detail there,
Am
but
I
it's
feeding it a
just
script?
you're literally sitting there as a team and just
Yeah,
feeding scripts, feeding everything, and then the output is
yeah.
there's a 2 hour movie done.
80 years.
Wow. All right.
So here's the thing, right? If you're feeding it a script, you've listened to the Script Note podcast, right?
Yeah.
What happens once they have a script?
Oh, edits and re-edits and
They change the script as they're filming it
yeah,
because they
yeah.
find out that the narrative isn't working the way it is. They change story elements, they change character elements because when they find out once they get it on film, certain things aren't working and I have to rewrite things.
But why couldn't you just do that with AI and just say, "Oh, actually change this, change that. Oh, add lighting here. It didn't look right." And why wouldn't you just
That's
do it?
why it's going to take 80 years, because they're going to have to change the script as they go in line. Not just not just like the visual and audio elements of it. They're going to have to rewrite the script in the process, and that rewriting of the script is going to have to be quality. Now, the caveat for that is like, all right, well, this is a commercial film that's going to go out in the theaters and it's going to be successful. Um, if it's just like put it out and people are like, oh, look at this thing,
No, I'm
that'll
talking in
happen.
the theater. I'm talking in the
Yeah,
theater. We're packing the theater because it's such a great movie.
yeah, I think 80 years. I mean, it's got to be able to learn how uh, to process what the script is, how to make changes into it to fix things that aren't going to work once it gets on there. Because what a screenwriter imagines is how it's going to look, and everything is going to not look the same. Then you have to do all of the audio generation. You have to compose music that's going to be appropriate. It's going to have to have the ability to process the emotional content of the acting and of the music. So now you're talking about affective computing, which we're not very close on, to be honest. Like, we're a long way off when it comes to affective approving computing, where a computer system can identify emotions that are going on within a human and understand them. So that's one of the things that I think is going to take the longest. Then it's got to be able to generate the visuals. It's got to be able to edit into a way that makes sense. And then it is incredibly difficult to produce like a feature film.
Yeah.
And I think it'll take a very long time before I can do what
All
you're
right.
asking me to
I agree to disagree.
do. Right?
I think the first feature film you'll see in the movies, people are like, "Wow, this was amazing. I had a really good time. I loved it." Potential Oscar nods, 2035.
Who gets the Oscar?
Nobody. They won't allow it. But I'm just saying, like
Well,
that
here's the thing,
good of a
right?
movie.
All right, so we can make a wager, and then I'm going to demonstrate why I'm right. You
Okay.
want to make the wager first?
Okay. I'll bet you $100.
Okay.
2035.
Okay. If we get to 2035 and a film has not been produced and released to the theaters and everybody loves it and has Oscar nominations, then you owe me $100.
Yes, and I will do it live on this podcast if it's still around. If people
Okay.
are still listening to us.
So I'm going to point something out that's gonna make you really wish that you hadn't done that.
Huh.
No studio can own the IP on that movie
Why not?
because that is the current copyright law.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Why do you need
That's
to
the
own the
IP
IP?
law.
You can release it. You can produce it. You can release it. You just don't own the IP. Someone can copy it if they
Who
want.
gets the money for it then? Nobody.
All this will be worked
Whoever
out before
produced
then.
these will put out the money. That you think they're going to change the laws around it? Yeah.
Well, I think
right now,
honestly,
whoever produces that can't collect money on it because they don't own can't own the IP on it.
let me tell you something. The laws will change on this. And the reason why I think the laws will change on this is once companies start having teams of people work together to use AI to build things, they're going to be like, this is ridiculous. We should be able to own the rights to this. And then lobbyists and the whole thing's going to kick back in.
So you think 11 years are going to do that?
Yeah.
On top of all of the technological improvements, you think a computer system is going to be able to understand how to emote within a film?
Yeah. 11 years. 11 years.
Right.
I think it's accelerating so fast that I think in 11 years we can have something pretty darn awesome. I mean, I'll say this. Let me ask you this question then.
I look
Final
forward
question.
to my $100.
All right.
Which is probably going to be worth $10 by then.
Yeah, exactly. I'll ask one last question, then we'll wrap this up because I know we're going a little long today. Is how long until you suspect that the AI can produce a really good script, just a script alone, that is a great working script that people can work off if that will produce a movie? Do you know what I mean?
A really good script.
Yeah, where you actually, when I say work off of, and Craig Mazin and those guys talk about this, the first script is always getting hacked up and everything, but it ends up moving through, meaning they're like, oh, I want to do a movie about Oppenheimer or whatever, right? So it get edited a million times, but the initial script, the initial idea, the initial concept is actually really good, and the person who wrote it is moving along. So how long until AI produces one good enough that we're like, yeah, we should make a movie based on that?
I think probably around. So I think it can output junk right now. I think
Yeah.
it'll it'll probably take around 6 or 7 years before it's actually
I agree.
producing things that are of decent quality. And
I
for it to be
agree. Yeah.
really good, I think that's more like 12, 15 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
For it to be
I
like,
do think from the text understanding versus video, I think we're way more accelerated on that.
yeah. And keep in mind, compared to a human, that's about how long a human would learn to be, what it would take for a human to learn to be really good at being a screenwriter. You take
Yeah.
into account the 10,000 hours thing.
Yep.
It's going to be multiplied because you're working with something that doesn't have a functioning brain.
Hmm.
So they need to, I think that there are certain technological advancements that need to be made. And who knows what the trade-offs are? They say when we learned the ability to focus on a task, it hurt our ability to multitask. So that could also, we could see similar things with AI as it develops.
Yeah,
There's
absolutely.
trade-offs.
Totally. Well, this was fun, D. Had a good time. So thanks for doing this. And thanks everyone so much for taking the time to listen to us. Really appreciate it. We post all our updates as well as video versions of the podcast on YouTube at the X Podcast. Please go to YouTube and subscribe to our channel. Also, if you like this podcast, found it interesting or informative, it helps us a great deal if you subscribe or leave a review. Please do that. It really helps us a lot to keep this going on whatever platform you use. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week.